A lost palace hides the ghost of a forgotten civilization. The Minoans of ancient Crete built a world of breathtaking artistry and puzzling rituals, only to vanish into myth. By the end of this journey, you will understand the profound secrets of Europe's first great civilization and the real story behind the legend of the Minotaur. We will explore why their advanced society collapsed so suddenly and what their undeciphered language might still reveal. What does it truly mean for an entire culture to disappear without a trace? Long before the legends took hold, a new culture was quietly taking root on the island of Crete. Around 3,500 years before the Common Era, something extraordinary began. This was not the sudden rise of a city, but the slow, deliberate dawn of a people who would one day build labyrinthine palaces. Crete itself was the perfect cradle. Positioned like a stepping stone between Europe, Asia, and Africa, the island was bathed by the warm waters of the Mediterranean Sea. This was not an isolated outpost, but the very heart of a watery crossroads. From this unique position, a maritime culture was born. The Minoans learned to read the waves and the winds, building ships that could carry them across the sea. They did not see the ocean as a barrier, but as a vast network of highways connecting them to distant lands. Their wealth grew not from conquering vast territories, but from mastering trade. Their vessels would have been a common sight, laden with the fine pottery, exquisite jewelry, and precious olive oil they produced, sailing to ports in Egypt, Anatolia, and the Greek mainland. In return, they brought back ideas, technologies, and raw materials like ivory and gold. This flow of goods and knowledge fueled their society for nearly 2,000 years. That is an almost unimaginable span of time. To put it in perspective, if their civilization started today, it would not end until the year 3900. For centuries, they refined their arts, developed complex social structures, and lived in a world largely of their own making, insulated by the sea yet connected to everyone. How does such a long and prosperous chapter simply turn to dust? The answer lies not just in their final days, but in the very foundations of their world. At the very center of this maritime empire stood a structure so grand it would fuel legends for millennia. The Palace of Knossos was not merely a royal residence, it was the vibrant, beating heart of Minoan civilization. Imagine walking through its sprawling complex, a multi-leveled maze of over 1,000 rooms connected by a network of twisting corridors and grand staircases. The layout was intentionally complex, a purposeful design without defensive walls that spoke of a people confident in their power and their gods. Sunlight would have poured down from clever openings known as light wells, illuminating courtyards and bathing the interiors in a warm, shifting glow. The walls themselves were alive with art. Vibrant frescoes depicted leaping dolphins, elegant court ladies in elaborate dresses, and sacred bulls in mid-charge. The colors were breathtaking, rich blues and earthy reds that have somehow retained their brilliance across thousands of years. This was a place of immense sophistication. Terracotta pipes built into the walls provided running water for both the elite and for complex sanitation systems. The palace had dedicated areas for everything from storing vast quantities of grain and olive oil in giant jars to hosting elaborate religious ceremonies. It was a city within a city, an administrative, economic, and spiritual hub all woven into one bewildering, magnificent structure. It is this very complexity that likely gave birth to one of the most enduring myths of the ancient world, the story of the Minotaur. The Greeks who came later would tell of a fearsome half-man, half-bull creature imprisoned by King Minos in a vast, inescapable labyrinth. Could this terrifying tale simply be a metaphor for the Palace of Knossos itself? To an outsider, the palace's endless corridors and sudden dead ends would have felt utterly confusing, a labyrinthine puzzle. The bull, a central figure in Minoan art and ritual, became a monster in the retelling. The legend of the Minotaur might not be a story of a literal beast, but a faded memory of the palace's awe-inspiring and intimidating design, and of the powerful, perhaps fearsome, king who ruled from within its walls. So the great labyrinth was not a dark dungeon, but a palace of light and innovation, a place where the real and the mythical seamlessly intertwined. Yet the vibrant frescoes and grand architecture tell only one side of the story. The Minoans left behind their own words, but we are unable to hear them. Scattered throughout the palace ruins, archaeologists have found thousands of clay tablets inscribed with a script now known as linear. These are not grand proclamations carved in stone, but the everyday paperwork of the palace administration, records of goods, supplies, and transactions. They are the raw data of a functioning civilization, the very thoughts and tallies of its people, frozen in time. For over a century, the world's most brilliant linguists and code breakers have tried to crack this code, and they have all failed. The script uses a series of elegant, structured symbols, suggesting a sophisticated writing system, but the language it represents remains utterly unknown. It is a locked door with no key. We can sometimes guess at a word's meaning, perhaps a type of grain or a unit of measurement, by the context in which it appears, but the sounds, the grammar, the very soul of the language is lost. This silence is profound. We can see the Minoans through the art they left behind, but we cannot know what they called themselves, the names of their gods in their own tongue, or the stories they told their children. Their history is written by others, their legacy filtered through the myths of the Greeks who came after them. They are a civilization seen through a veil, their true voice forever just out of reach. What world-changing ideas or beautiful poetry might be etched into those humble clay tablets? For now, the Minoans guard their final secret well. Deep within the labyrinth of Knossos lies a chamber that feels different from all the rest. This is the throne room, and stepping inside is like crossing into a sacred space. The centerpiece is a singular, sculpted seat made of white alabaster, its high back and curved contours still looking remarkably regal after thousands of years. It is the oldest throne in all of Europe, and it was never meant for a simple ruler. The atmosphere here is charged with a spiritual gravity. The walls are adorned with magnificent frescoes of griffins, those mythical beasts with the body of a lion and the head of an eagle. They are depicted in a graceful, resting pose, flanking the throne as if in eternal attendance. Their presence is not merely decorative, it is a declaration. In the ancient world, griffins were sacred guardians, often shown alongside deities. So who was meant to sit here, surrounded by such powerful symbols? This question lies at the heart of a great debate. Some see a mortal king, a priest king who wielded both political and divine authority. In this view, the throne was the seat of a living ruler who served as the chief intermediary between the people and their gods. His power was not just of the sword, but of the spirit. Others propose a far more mystical possibility. They argue that the throne was not for a human at all, but was instead the symbolic seat of a goddess herself. Perhaps it was occupied only by a high priestess during sacred rituals, embodying the deity for a people. The room's design, with a sunken basin directly opposite the throne, likely used for libations or purification rites, strongly supports the idea that this was a place of intense ceremony. This debate reveals the very essence of Minoan society, a culture where the line between the palace and the temple was beautifully blurred. Power was deeply intertwined with the sacred, suggesting a theocratic system where governing and worshipping were one and the same act. The throne, therefore, was not just a seat of temporal power, but a conduit to the divine. The debate over the throne room leads us directly into the spiritual world that gave it meaning. To understand the Minoans, we must step into their sacred spaces, where the divine was not a distant concept, but a living, breathing presence. At the center of their belief system stood a powerful female deity, a great goddess who embodied the cycles of nature, life, and death. We see her in many forms, most strikingly as the famous snake goddess. This captivating figure, crafted from faience, holds writhing serpines in her raised hands. her expression one of serene command. The snakes, often symbols of rebirth and the underworld, are not threats but her sacred companions. She represents a profound connection to the earth and its mysteries, a potent mother figure who could grant life and also guide souls into the next world. This was a spirituality deeply rooted in the natural world, where the divine was fundamentally immanent, found in the bloom of a lily, the charge of a bull, and the coiling of a serpent. This reverence for nature's power is echoed in the very symbols that adorned their altars and palace walls. The labrys, or double-headed axe, was far more than a weapon. It was a primary sacred emblem, likely used in the ritual sacrifice of bulls. Its symmetrical form, cutting in two directions, perhaps symbolized a balance of opposing forces, male and female, earth and sky. Then there are the iconic horns of consecration. These stylized bull horns, often placed atop altars and framing sacred gateways, served as a powerful channel between the human and the divine. They reached upward, drawing celestial power down to the earth, consecrating the space they guarded, and of course, the bull itself was central to this symbolic language. The animal's raw, untamable strength was seen as a manifestation of divine energy. The famous bull-leaping frescoes are not mere depictions of a sport, but likely records of a dangerous and sacred ritual. A ritual where young men and women literally grasped the horns of the sacred, performing acrobatic feats that symbolized a human communion with the potent, chaotic force of the god. In this world, every symbol, every ritual act, was a thread in a vast tapestry of meaning, weaving the human community into the eternal cycles of the natural and supernatural realms. This breathtaking fresco captures a moment of pure, suspended motion. A young man is caught in midair, arching gracefully over the back of a charging bull. One figure grips the animal's horns at the front, while another stands poised behind, arms outstretched, ready to catch the leaper. The bull itself is a vision of immense explosive power, muscles coiled and head lowered in a full-speed charge. The entire scene is a whirlwind of coordinated energy and astonishing bravery, but what are we truly witnessing? Was this a public spectacle, a deadly sport for the entertainment of the crowds? The sheer danger suggests it was far more than a simple pastime. The risk of death was ever present, turning any successful leap into a triumph of human skill and courage. This leads to another compelling interpretation, that bull leaping was a rite of passage. Perhaps it was a crucial test that young men and women had to undergo to prove their worth and transition into full adulthood. Success in the arena would have marked them as valuable, courageous members of the community, yet the bull's sacred status points to the deepest layer of meaning. This was likely a profound religious ceremony, a literal dance with the divine. By grasping the horns of the sacred animal, the leaper was not just showing off, but physically engaging with the raw, untamed power of the god. The act itself was a form of communion, a ritual where humanity temporarily mastered the chaotic force of nature, bringing balance and order to the world. It was probably all three at once, a sport that tested the body, a ritual that honored the gods, and a passage that forged the spirit. The fresco, then, is not a simple record of an event. It is a frozen prayer, a depiction of the ultimate act of faith, where for a fleeting second a human being could fly. This mastery of the waves was not merely for trade, it was the very source of their empire. The Minoans created history's first thalassocracy, a term meaning a sea empire, a realm built not on conquered land but on controlled waterways. Their powerful navy, a fleet of oared ships depicted on seal stones and frescoes, ensured that their merchant vessels could sail the eastern Mediterranean without fear. These warships were sleek and fast, designed for patrol and protection, projecting Minoan power across the waves. This maritime dominance meant that no other culture could challenge their commercial networks. Their influence stretched from the coasts of Anatolia, where they traded for precious metals, to the shores of Egypt, where they exchanged their fine pottery and olive oil for ivory and papyrus. They established outposts throughout the Cycladic Islands, turning the Aegean Sea into a Minoan lake. Think of it not as an empire of borders and governors, but as a vast, interconnected web of trade routes and safe harbors, all answerable to the Palace at Knossos. They did not need to occupy territory with armies when they could control the flow of goods, ideas, and wealth itself. This sea-based system brought incredible prosperity, insulating them from land-based conflicts and allowing their unique culture to flourish for centuries. The entire Eastern Mediterranean became their marketplace, their highway, and their domain. How does such a powerful and seemingly secure empire simply vanish from the world stage? Amidst the ruins of another great palace at Phaistos, a discovery was made that defies all understanding. In the early 20th century, an Italian archaeologist unearthed a simple, fired clay disc, about the size of a small plate. Its humble appearance belied an incredible secret. Both sides of this disc are covered, from edge to center, in a continuous spiral of 45 distinct symbols. These are not carved or painted, but meticulously stamped into the clay while it was still soft. Each tiny picture is a masterpiece of precision, featuring figures like a walking man, a plumed head, a shield, a beehive, and a ship. This is the Phaistos disc, and it is utterly unique. Nothing like it has ever been found anywhere else in the Minoan world, or indeed in the entire ancient Mediterranean. This singularity is the core of the mystery. Who made it, and why was its complex technology of movable type never used again for over 2,500 years? The disc exists in a vacuum of its own making, a solitary artifact from a lost conversation. Its purpose is a riddle that has tormented scholars for over a century. Was it a prayer wheel for an unknown religious rite? Its spiral a path for divine invocation? Could it have been a board for a sacred game, a symbolic journey for the spirit? Or is it a message, a royal decree, or a treaty, pressed into clay for permanence? The sequence of symbols seems to follow a logical order, with some signs grouped and repeated, suggesting a structured language, perhaps even a poetic hymn. Yet without a single other example to compare it to, the code remains unbreakable. It is a locked door for which we cannot even find the keyhole. The Phaistos disc is more than an artifact. It is a whisper from the past, a single sentence from a lost library, challenging us to finally hear the voice of its creator. A silent titan was stirring just 70 miles north of Crete. The island of Thura, a vibrant Minoan outpost, was in fact a massive volcano. Around the year 1600 before the Common Era, it erupted with a force unmatched in human history. This was not a simple volcanic event, it was a cataclysm that reshaped the world. Geologists estimate the explosion was 4 times more powerful than the famous Krakatoa eruption of 1883. The entire center of the island collapsed into a void of magma, creating the vast caldera that today defines the shape of Santorini, but the initial blast was only the beginning. The eruption sent a column of superheated ash and rock punching 20 miles into the stratosphere. Prevailing winds then carried this immense plume directly south toward Crete. For days, a relentless, suffocating rain of white ash would have fallen upon the island. It blotted out the sun, smothering the verdant farmland that was the backbone of the Minoan economy. Crops would have withered and died under the acidic blanket, and livestock would have perished. The very air became poisonous to breathe. Then came the water. The collapse of the volcano's core into the sea triggered tsunamis of almost unimaginable scale. Walls of water, hundreds of feet high, raced across the open ocean at the speed of a jet aircraft before slamming into the northern coast of Crete. These waves would have scoured the coastline clean, obliterating the Minoan fleet, their very source of power and wealth, and utterly destroying every port city and seaside palace in their path. The civilization was hit with a 1-2 punch of biblical proportions, from the sky and from the sea. The Minoan world, a masterpiece of culture and commerce built over 2,000 years, was brought to its knees in a matter of days. While it may not have been the single cause of their disappearance, the thorough eruption was the hammer blow that shattered their foundations, leaving them vulnerable and unable to recover. But that very ash, the agent of destruction, became an unlikely guardian of history. On the island of Thura itself, the volcano preserved a perfect snapshot of a thriving Minoan town, a place called Crete. This was no small village, but a sophisticated urban center, a smaller version of the grand palaces back on Crete. When archaeologists began to carefully excavate the site, they did not find a city of the dead, but a community suspended in time. The thick layers of volcanic pumice sealed the town like a perfect time capsule, protecting it from the elements and from later human interference. The first astonishing revelation was the sheer height of the buildings. Crete was a town of multi-story structures, some reaching 3 stories high, a testament to advanced Minoan engineering. These were not simple mud brick huts, but complex houses with stone foundations and carefully laid out rooms. Walking through its streets, you would have seen a society that valued comfort and public health. The town was equipped with an extensive and sophisticated drainage system, with clay pipes running beneath the streets to carry away wastewater. Inside the homes, you would find flush toilets connected to these central sewers, a level of sanitation that would not become common again for over 1,000 years. This was a civilization that understood urban planning on a scale that rivals modern cities. Yet the true soul of Crete is revealed not in its plumbing, but on its walls. The frescoes that adorned these homes are some of the most vibrant and detailed art to survive from the ancient world. Unlike the formal, ceremonial art of Knossos, these paintings offer an intimate glimpse into daily Minoan life and their worldview. One magnificent fresco, known as the flotilla fresco, spans an entire room. It depicts a whole fleet of ships, their sails billowing, sailing between colorful towns teeming with life. The scene is one of celebration, a maritime procession that captures the Minoans' deep connection to the sea. Another breathtaking work, the spring fresco, shows a rocky landscape dotted with vibrant red lilies and swooping swallows. It is a scene of pure, unadulterated nature, a celebration of the island's beauty painted with a spontaneity and grace that feels utterly modern. These were not decorations, but windows into how the people of Crete saw themselves, as part of a vibrant, interconnected world of trade, nature, and community. Stepping through these ash-preserved streets is like walking through a dream of a lost world, a world that was vibrant, sophisticated, and full of life just before the sky fell. The art they left behind is a world without sharp edges. Minoan frescoes and pottery ripple with a sense of effortless motion, where every line seems to flow into the next. This is not the rigid, formal art of their contemporaries, but something entirely unique, a visual language of life itself. Human figures are captured in dynamic, almost impossible poses, their bodies curved and elastic as they leap over bulls or process in ceremonial robes. Even when standing still, they possess a graceful vitality. The famous Prince of the Lilies fresco exemplifies this perfectly, depicting a young man with a wasp waist and a sinuous physique, his crown of lilies bending as if in a gentle breeze. He moves through a world alive with energy. This fluidity extends to their portrayal of the natural world, which was not merely a backdrop but a central character in their art. The sea was a particular source of inspiration. Marine-style pottery is covered in wonderfully organic designs, with octopuses spreading their tentacles around the curve of a vase, their suckers clearly defined, as if caught in a slow, underwater dance. Dolphins arc joyfully through the waves, and schools of fish swim through seas dotted with coral and seaweed. On land, the same vibrant life pulses through their work. Frescoes show blue monkeys, creatures likely imported from Africa, carefully gathering saffron from crocus flowers. This scene is more than just decoration. It is a snapshot of a ritual or industry, blending the real with the symbolic in a single, beautiful image. Flowers, particularly lilies and papyrus, bloom across their walls, their forms stylized yet bursting with a naturalistic elegance. This consistent aesthetic reveals a society that saw itself as part of a living, breathing cosmos. There are no scenes of conquest, no grandiose images of kings trampling their enemies. Instead, the art celebrates life, movement, and a harmonious relationship with the environment. It is the vision of a people who found the divine not in stern idols, but in the joyful leap of a dolphin and the delicate unfurling of a lily. Among the most captivating relics to emerge from the labyrinth are the mesmerizing snake goddess figurines. Crafted from a brilliant blue-green faience, these statuettes depict a woman of striking elegance and authority. Her torso is bare, a sign of fertility and natural power, and she holds her arms outstretched, a writhing snake coiled confidently in each hand. A third snake often slithers across her body, sometimes draped over her shoulders or winding around her tall, tiered headdress. Her expression is not one of fear, but of serene command, as if she is in complete harmony with these potent creatures. The immediate question is, who is she? The debate over her identity opens a window directly into the Minoan soul. One compelling theory casts her as a literal goddess, a powerful deity of the household and the underworld. In this view, the snakes are her sacred companions, symbols of the earth's regenerative power because of their ability to shed their skin and emerge renewed. She would be a guardian of the home, a protector of the storerooms from vermin, and a guide for the souls of the dead. Yet another interpretation sees her not as a divine being, but as a human embodiment of one. She could represent a powerful priestess, a living woman who, during specific rituals, would take on the role of the goddess. In this sacred theater, she would handle the serpents to channel divine energy, becoming a temporary vessel for the deity's power to bless and protect the community. The snakes themselves are the key to the mystery. Across countless cultures, the serpent represents a duality of danger and healing, death and rebirth. For an agrarian society like the Minoans, deeply tied to the cycles of nature, the snake's connection to the earth made it a natural emblem of chthonic power, a creature that could communicate with the forces below the ground that ensured the harvest. So the snake goddess stands at the crossroads of these ideas. She is a figure of domestic spirituality and cosmic cycles, a symbol of protection for this life and a guide for the next. She is both a comforting maternal presence and a wielder of potent primal magic. These architectural wonders were not just beautiful, they were brilliantly functional. Light wells were a stroke of genius, open shafts that ran from the roof down through multiple stories. They acted like natural lanterns, flooding the deep interiors of the palace with indirect, shimmering sunlight. This clever design ensured that even rooms buried deep within the labyrinth were bathed in a soft, ever-changing glow, eliminating the need for dark, torch-lit corridors and creating an atmosphere of airy openness. But just a few steps away from these sunlit spaces lay chambers of profound darkness. Descend into a pillar crypt, and the mood shifts entirely. These were small, subterranean rooms, often located directly beneath the most important areas of the palace. Their defining feature was a row of massive, square stone pillars. The air in these crypts would have been cool, still, and heavy with silence. There were no light wells here. Scholars believe these chambers were used for chthonic rituals, ceremonies dedicated to the powerful deities of the earth and the underworld. The pillars themselves were not merely structural, they were likely seen as direct conduits to the world below, their bases rooted deep in the ground, symbolically connecting the human realm to the subterranean divine. Offerings may have been poured directly onto these stones, a libation seeping into the earth to appease the gods who controlled the harvest and the cycle of life and death. This stark contrast between the luminous light wells and the shadowy pillar crypts reflects the dual nature of Minoan spirituality itself, a belief system that honored both the bright gods of the sky and the dark generative powers of the earth. Connecting these sacred and secular spaces was the unique layout of the Minoan Hall. This was the heart of the residential quarters, a versatile suite of rooms designed for both daily life and important gatherings. A typical hall consisted of two main areas separated by a row of double doors. The inner space offered privacy and warmth, while the outer section, often opening onto a light well, provided ventilation and light. By opening all the doors, the entire suite could be transformed into one large, impressive reception area. This flexible design allowed the Minoan elite to control movement, light, and social interaction with remarkable sophistication. The very architecture of their palaces was a physical manifestation of their worldview, a perfect balance between light and dark, public and private, the human community and the eternal divine. The same ships that forged their sea empire were also floating warehouses, carrying the lifeblood of the Minoan economy across the known world. Their wealth was built not on conquest, but on a few remarkably valuable commodities. One of their most intriguing exports was saffron, the vibrant crimson spice derived from the crocus flower. This was not merely a culinary luxury. In the ancient world, saffron was worth its weight in gold, used as a brilliant dye for royal garments, a perfume, a medicine, and a key ingredient in religious rituals. Minoan frescoes show young women and blue monkeys carefully harvesting the delicate stigmas, a scene that underscores just how central this painstaking process was to their culture. A single pound of dry saffron requires the hand-picked stigmas from over 70,000 flowers, making it an incredibly labor-intensive and therefore immensely profitable trade good. They packaged this precious spice in delicate, eggshell-thin pottery known as camers ware. These vessels are masterpieces of artistry, their dark, lustrous surfaces decorated with swirling, spontaneous designs in white, red, and orange. They depicted spirals, floral patterns, and marine life, all painted with a fluid, joyful energy. To hold a camers ware cup was to hold a piece of the Minoan aesthetic soul. But it was also a statement of supreme technical skill. The pottery was so fine and so distinctive that it became a status symbol throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, found in the palaces of Egypt and the Levant, instantly recognizable as a product of Crete's master artisans. Perhaps their most crucial role in the broader Bronze Age world, however, was as master metalsmiths and traders. The entire era was defined by bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. While copper was relatively available, tin was exceedingly rare. The Minoans, with their far-reaching trade networks, became the critical middlemen in this essential supply chain. Their ships would have transported ingots of Cypriot copper and scarce tin from as far away as Anatolia or even beyond, bringing these raw materials to their own workshops and then distributing the finished bronze goods, weapons, tools, and ceremonial objects across the sea lanes. They did not just move goods, they added value at every step, transforming raw metal into coveted artifacts and common flowers into a king's ransom. This complex, multi-layered economy, powered by saffron, pottery, and copper, turned their island into a nexus of wealth and innovation, a humming engine of commerce that connected continents. Yet for all the grandeur of their sunlit palaces, the Minoans felt a powerful pull toward the darkness below. Deep within the mountains of Crete lay another kind of sacred space, the labyrinthine caves that served as portals to the underworld. Places like the Psychro Cave and the Cave of Eileithia were not simple holes in the ground, but cathedrals carved by nature, used for ritual purposes for thousands of years. To descend into the Psychro Cave is to leave the world of the living behind. The air grows cool and damp, and the only sounds are the steady drip of water and the echo of your own footsteps. In this profound darkness, archaeologists have found a stunning collection of votive offerings, objects left as gifts for the gods. These were not the grand treasures of the palace, but deeply personal items, bronze figurines of warriors, delicate jewelry, and double-edged axes made of thin, precious metal. Each one represented a prayer, a desperate hope, or a profound thank you from an individual soul. Why bring such valuables into this intimidating darkness? The caves were believed to be direct gateways to the chthonic deities, the powerful gods who ruled the earth and the realm of the dead. By leaving an offering here, a person was sending a message directly into the hands of the divine. The cave of Aletheia reveals an even more intimate dimension of this practice. This cave was sacred to the goddess of childbirth and midwifery. The offerings found here are poignant in their specificity, small clay figurines of pregnant women and mothers holding infants. For a Minoan woman hoping for a safe delivery or giving thanks for a healthy child, this cave was her most sacred sanctuary. She would have come here to perform a simple ritual, leaving her clay statue as a permanent plea or a note of gratitude. These caves held the entire cycle of human experience, from the desperate prayers for new life to the solemn communications with the world of the departed. They remind us that Minoan spirituality was not confined to the official ceremonies of the palace, but thrived in the personal, shadowy spaces where everyday people sought to touch the divine. His figure strides across the wall with an impossible grace, a young man frozen in a moment of serene authority. This is the Prince of the Lilies, a fresco that has captivated and confounded all who see it. His torso is bare and sinuous, his waist cinched tightly, and he wears a magnificent crown of lilies and peacock feathers that curves gently with his movement. In one hand he grasps what might be a sacred staff, while with the other he leads a mythical griffin, but what we see today is largely a modern recreation, a puzzle assembled from fragments. The confident face, the elegant crown, and the powerful torso were all found separately, and their union is an educated guess by archaeologists. This reconstruction means the figure's true identity remains one of Knossos' most beautiful enigmas. Is this a portrait of a mortal king, a human ruler at the peak of his power? His commanding posture and the control he exerts over the mythical beast suggest a person of immense temporal authority. Yet everything about him transcends the ordinary. The lilies are not just decoration, they are symbols of purity and a direct connection to the natural world the Minoans held sacred. The peacock feathers may symbolize vision or even immortality. This is no simple royal portrait. The figure exists in a space between the human and the divine. He could be a priest-king, a living man who served as the chief intermediary between his people and their gods. In this role, his power was not derived from military might alone, but from his unique ability to channel divine will. His act of leading the griffin, a sacred guardian, becomes a ritual performance, a demonstration of his sanctioned command over even the most powerful spiritual forces. There is a third, more profound possibility. Could this image represent a deity himself, a young god of vegetation and rebirth, adorned with the flowers of spring? The fresco's lack of a clear narrative context deepens the mystery. It does not show him receiving tribute or leading an army. Instead, it captures a singular, symbolic moment of effortless control. This ambiguity is the key to understanding Minoan leadership. The line between king and cleric, between human ruler and divine embodiment, was not just blurred, it was perhaps non-existent. Power was performative and spiritual. To lead was to participate in the sacred cycles of nature, to wear its symbols and to command the respect of its mythical guardians. The Prince of the Lilies, therefore, is not a puzzle to be solved, but a statement to be understood. He is the perfect emblem of a civilization where governing was itself a form of worship, and where the greatest authority walked hand in hand with the gods. A new voice began to echo through the abandoned corridors of Knossos. Centuries after the Great Collapse, the clay tablets in the palace storerooms were inscribed with a different hand, using a different script. This was Linear B, and its discovery solved one mystery while deepening another. For decades, scholars believed it was simply another form of the Minoan language, perhaps a later evolution of the enigmatic Linear A. But in the early 1950s, a young architect named Michael Ventris made a breakthrough that shook the foundations of ancient history. He proved, against all expectation, that linear B was not Minoan at all. It was an early form of Greek. The symbols, though they looked similar to linear A, were being used to spell out the words of the Mycenaean people from the Greek mainland. Suddenly, the administrative records of the palace became readable. They listed familiar Greek deities like Zeus and Hera, and they detailed the management of flocks, land, and goods. The language of power on Crete had fundamentally shifted. This was not a case of cultural exchange, but of a political takeover. The Mycenaeans had not just traded with the weakened Minoans, they had moved in. They occupied the grand palaces, sat in the throne rooms, and used the existing bureaucratic machinery to rule the island. They were the new masters of the labyrinth. What does this script reveal about the nature of this conquest? The tablets show a society obsessed with inventory and control, a stark contrast to the fluid, nature-loving art of the original Minoans. The vibrant goddess-centered spirituality seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a more martial, patriarchal order focused on recording weapons and chariots. Yet the Mycenaeans were also clearly in awe of the civilization they had inherited. They adopted Minoan artistic styles, religious symbols, and architectural techniques. They wrote their own Greek language using a writing system they had almost certainly learned from the Minoans themselves. This creates a poignant picture of cultural absorption. The Minoan world did not vanish in a flash of fire, but was slowly digested by its mainland rivals. Their genius for art, trade, and architecture was so profound that it shaped their conquerors, becoming the very foundation of the later classical Greek world. The silent, mysterious linear tablets were pushed aside, their meanings forgotten as the new rulers stamped their own identity onto the island. The ghost of the Minoans lingered in every fresco and every courtyard, but their voice was forever silenced, their story now written by others in a language they would never have understood. The same palaces that echoed with grand ceremonies were sustained by the quiet rhythms of daily toil. For every prince depicted on a fresco, there were countless farmers, artisans, and fishers who formed the true backbone of this civilization. Their world was one of sun-drenched fields and bustling workshops, a life deeply connected to the land and sea. The Minoan diet was a celebration of the Mediterranean itself. Breakfast might consist of barley bread dipped in olive oil, accompanied by figs or dates. Lunch and dinner would often feature fish freshly caught from the sea, seasoned with wild herbs and served with lentils or peas. Olives and grapes were not just food, they were pillars of the economy, pressed into oil and wine that filled the giant storage jars of the palaces. This was a healthy and varied diet, supplemented by goat cheese, honey, and on special occasions, meat from sacrificed animals. Their clothing, beautifully preserved in frescoes, was both practical and elegant. Men typically wore simple loincloths or kilts, often with a decorative codpiece, while laborers might work in little more than a belt. Women, however, were depicted in strikingly sophisticated attire. Their dresses were layered and colorful, with tight, fitted bodices that laced below the bust, leaving the breasts exposed in a manner that seemed entirely natural and unremarkable in their culture. Flounced tiered skirts swung gracefully with their movement, and they adorned themselves with elaborate jewelry, from gold hairpins to delicate necklaces of precious stones. These were not the drab rags of a suppressed class, but the vibrant garments of a people who valued beauty and self-expression in their daily lives. A common Minoan's home was a far cry from the palace's grandeur, but it was often well-constructed and comfortable. Built from mud brick on stone foundations, these multi-room houses could have 2 stories, with central courtyards for cooking and socializing. Inside, walls were often plastered and sometimes painted with simple designs, and families used low wooden beds, woven mats, and clay storage jars called pithoi for their belongings. While they lacked the running water of the palaces, evidence suggests they understood basic sanitation. The skilled artisans who lived in these homes were the engine of Minoan prosperity. Potters worked at their wheels, creating everything from the exquisite, eggshell-thin kamares ware for export to sturdy everyday bowls. Metal workers labored over furnaces, smelting imported copper and tin to cast bronze tools, weapons, and magnificent ritual vessels. Textile production was a major industry, with women spinning wool and flax into thread on drop spindles and weaving intricate, colorful patterns on looms. The vibrant dyes for these fabrics, like the famous Minoan purple extracted from sea snails and the precious saffron yellow, were themselves products of immense skill and labor. This vast, interconnected network of common labor, from the farmer tending his olive groves to the weaver at her loom, created the surplus wealth that allowed the palaces to rise, proving that the true labyrinth was not of stone, but of countless human hands working in unison. Among the most fascinating artifacts unearthed from the ruins are vessels that defy simple description. These are the rhyta, ritual containers crafted with an astonishing blend of artistry and sacred purpose. They were not ordinary cups or bowls, but highly specialized instruments designed for one of the most important acts in Minoan life, communication with the divine. Fashioned from clay, stone, or even precious metals, a rhyton is immediately recognizable by its unique structure. It typically has an opening at the top for filling and a separate, smaller hole at the bottom for pouring. This design was not for casual drinking, but for the controlled, continuous flow of a liquid offering. Imagine a priest or priestess tilting one of these vessels during a ceremony, a steady stream of liquid arcing down onto an altar or into the earth. This act, known as a libation, was a fundamental prayer in liquid form, a gift poured out to honor the gods. The most powerful and common shape for these vessels was the head of a bull. A bull rhyton is a masterpiece of observation, capturing the animal's fierce strength and spiritual significance in meticulous detail. The curving horns, the intense eyes, the flaring nostrils, every feature is rendered with a lifelike precision that suggests these were more than just decorative objects. They were vessels of transformation. By pouring an offering through the form of a sacred bull, the Minoans were likely channeling the animal's immense power, directing its divine energy along with the wine or water or blood into the spiritual realm. Other rhyta took the form of lion heads, creatures symbolizing royal authority and protection, or even the heads of griffins, blending the earthly and the mythical. There were also conical rhyta, decorated with scenes of bull leaping or marine life, connecting the ritual act to the core symbols of their culture. But what liquid flowed through these sacred funnels? Wine is the most probable offering, a valuable and symbolic gift representing the fruit of the land and the joy of life. Yet in the most profound and solemn rituals, the offering might have been the blood of a sacrificed bull. This would have been the ultimate libation, returning the very life force of the sacred animal to the earth and the gods, a potent exchange meant to ensure the continued cycle of fertility and order. The rhyton, therefore, was a crucial bridge. It was the physical tool that transformed a common substance into a divine gift, a beautiful, terrifying, and essential key to maintaining the balance of their world. The great labyrinth of myth was not a cage for a monster, but a memory of a palace. The Greek legend of Theseus and the Minotaur, passed down for centuries, begins to unravel when held against the reality of Knossos. Imagine the story from the perspective of the later Greeks. They told of a powerful king Minos who demanded a terrible tribute from Athens, 7 young men and 7 young women to be sent into a labyrinth and devoured by a half-man, half-bull creature. This myth, so full of terror, feels less like pure invention and more like a distorted echo of a civilization the Greeks themselves could scarcely comprehend. The tribute of youths could be a garbled memory of a real relationship. Perhaps it was not a sacrifice to a monster, but a form of diplomatic exchange. Young nobles from the Greek mainland might have been sent to Crete as pages, hostages, or even initiates into the powerful and mysterious rituals of the Minoan court. To the more austere, warrior-based Mycenaean Greeks, the sight of these young people participating in the dangerous, sacred bull-leaping ceremonies would have been shocking and alien. They would have seen a dance with a powerful, charging bull not as an act of worship, but as a death sentence. The bull leaper, in their retelling, became the victim. The intricate, sprawling palace with its bewildering corridors, so unlike their own fortified citadels, was easily transformed in their legends into a deadly, inescapable maze. And the creature at its heart, the Minotaur, is perhaps the most telling distortion of all. The Minoans revered the bull as a manifestation of divine power. Their priests and kings likely wore ritual bull masks during certain ceremonies, embodying the god's strength. A Mycenaean visitor catching a glimpse of such a figure, a man with the head of a bull in the shadowy halls of Knossos, could have carried home a story not of a sacred priest, but of a flesh-eating beast. The hero Theseus, then, becomes a symbol of a shifting world order. His slaying of the Minotaur and his escape from the labyrinth with the help of a Cretan princess represents the decline of Minoan sea power and the rise of the Mycenaean Greeks. It is the story of one culture conquering another, then weaving a fantastical tale to explain the strange and magnificent world they had just overthrown. The myth is not a history, but a fossil, preserving the shape of a lost reality within a shell of fear and wonder. Their beliefs about life and death extended far beyond the sacred caves and into the quiet, final resting places of their people. The Minoans approached death with the same practical artistry they applied to life, and their burial practices reveal a profound belief in a continued existence. They did not build massive, imposing pyramids for their rulers. Instead, they created communal tombs that felt like homes for the departed. Two main types of structures housed the dead. The Tholos tomb was a striking beehive-shaped structure built from stone, its circular walls rising to a corbelled roof that created a solemn, enclosed space. The other common form was the rock-cut chamber tomb, a man-made cave carefully hollowed out of a hillside, its entrance often framed like a doorway. Both were designed not for a single individual, but for generations of a family or community, a place where the ancestors remained physically close. Inside these tombs, the primary container for the dead was the humble pithos, the same giant clay jar used in the palaces for storing grain and oil. A body would be carefully placed in a fetal position, curled up as if for sleep, and then sealed inside this enormous jar. Sometimes the pithos was buried upright in the earth, and other times it was laid on its side within the tomb, looking like a row of eternal sleeping quarters. This use of a storage jar is deeply symbolic. It suggests the Minoans saw the body as a vessel holding something precious, perhaps the soul itself, stored safely away for its journey or for a future return. What did they pack for this ultimate journey? The grave goods tell a vivid story. The deceased were buried with objects they had used and loved in life. For a woman, this might include her personal jewelry, a delicate seal stone that served as her signature, and her fine bone needles for weaving. A man might be buried with his bronze tools or his personal drinking cup. They also received offerings from the living, small clay figurines and fresh pots containing food and drink, supplies for the road ahead. This practice makes one thing abundantly clear. The Minoans believed the soul continued in a way that required sustenance, identity, and comfort. They were not sending their loved ones into a void, but into a parallel world that mirrored their own. The careful fetal positioning of the body inside the womb-like jar, surrounded by household items, paints a picture of death not as an end, but as a transition into another state of being, a return to the source with all the necessities for a new kind of life. So how does a civilization that endured for nearly 2,000 years finally come to an end? The fall of the Minoans was not a single event, but a slow unraveling, and scholars have pieced together several compelling theories to explain their final disappearance around 1100 before the Common Era. The most traditional explanation points to an invasion from the Greek mainland. The Mycenaeans, a rising warrior culture, saw a golden opportunity in a weakened Crete. With the Minoan fleet devastated by tsunamis and their economy in shambles, The island was vulnerable. Evidence of widespread fire at several palace sites around 1450 BC suggests a violent takeover. The Mycenaeans did not just destroy, however, they moved in, occupying the Palace of Knossos for centuries and writing their own language, Linear B, on the administrative tablets. This was a conquest, but one that absorbed the brilliant remnants of the culture it overthrew. Yet an invasion alone may not tell the whole story. Many researchers argue the civilization was already dying from the inside out, its lifeblood choked off by the environmental catastrophe of the Thura eruption. Even decades after the initial disaster, the consequences would have been catastrophic. The thick layer of ash that blanketed Crete's farmland would have rendered the soil infertile for a generation, leading to chronic famine and a drastic population decline. The tsunamis that shattered their fleet also destroyed the vital port infrastructure that supported their sea empire. Without trade, the palace economy, which relied on taxing and redistributing imported goods, would have collapsed. A society starving and isolated is a society ripe for conquest. A third theory suggests the very ground beneath their feet turned against them. Crete sits directly on a major tectonic fault line, and archaeologists have found clear evidence of massive earthquake damage at multiple Minoan sites. Walls are tilted, foundations are cracked, and large storage jars are buried under collapsed masonry. It is possible that a series of powerful quakes, either connected to the Thura eruption or occurring independently, delivered the final blow to palaces already struggling to recover. So which was it? The truth likely lies in a tragic convergence of all these factors. The Thura eruption was a knockout punch that shattered their economy and environment. A subsequent wave of earthquakes further demolished their grand centers, and into this broken world strode the Mycenaeans, not as the sole cause of the collapse, but as the inheritors of a civilization that had already been brought to its knees by the forces of nature. The labyrinth did not fall to a single monster, but to a storm of fire, water, and earth. The echoes of the labyrinth did not fade with the fall of the palaces. Instead, they resonated across the sea, shaping the very cultures that rose in their wake. The Mycenaean Greeks who occupied the ruins of Knossos were not just conquerors, they were the first and most direct inheritors of the Minoan genius. Walking through a Mycenaean citadel, you can see this debt etched in stone. Their art undergoes a dramatic transformation after contact with Crete. The stiff, formal figures of early Mycenaean pottery suddenly burst into life, adopting the fluid lines, vibrant marine life, and graceful floral motifs that were the hallmark of Minoan artisans. They learned to build in the Minoan style, constructing palaces with central courtyards and sophisticated drainage systems, a world away from their own earlier, more fortress-like structures. They even adopted the Minoan administrative system, using the Linear B script they adapted to write their own Greek language. This was not a mere copying of styles, but a profound absorption of an entire worldview, one that valued beauty, nature, and sophisticated organization. Yet the legacy runs even deeper than architecture and art. The spiritual world of the Minoans seems to have seeped into the very foundations of Greek mythology. The powerful figure of the Minoan snake goddess, a mistress of animals and the cycles of life, finds a striking parallel in later Greek goddesses. Artemis, the untamable goddess of the wild, often depicted holding serpines or stags, carries that same primal energy. The great Earth Mother Demeter, who governs the harvest and the seasons, echoes the Minoan goddess's dominion over nature's fertility. Even the terrifying Minotaur, a monster born from a queen's unnatural passion, may be a distorted memory of the bull-masked priests who performed sacred rituals in the labyrinth. The Greek stories are darker, more filled with divine drama and human tragedy, but their roots may reach back into the light-filled courtyards and dark pillar crypts of Crete. The Minoans did not simply vanish, they were woven into the fabric of their successors, their colors and forms blending into the tapestry of what would become classical Greece. Their silent language was never deciphered, but their visual and spiritual vocabulary became a universal tongue, spoken in the art, architecture, and myths of the Western world for millennia to come. Emerging from the labyrinth of Minoan history leaves us with a profound sense of wonder. This was a civilization that achieved breathtaking heights of artistry and sophistication, not through conquest, but through a deep connection to the sea, the earth, and the sacred. Their world was one of vibrant frescoes and peaceful trade, of light-filled palaces and dark, sacred caves, all woven together into a complex tapestry of life. We are left with the haunting beauty of their silent language, the elegant mystery of the snake goddess, and the lingering echo of a society that flourished for 2,000 years. Their sudden collapse reminds us of the fragile balance between human ambition and the raw power of nature. Yet, the story of the Minoans is not a tragedy of loss, but a testament to rediscovery. Every new artifact pulled from the ash of Thura, every fresh examination of a faded fresco, adds another piece to the puzzle. The past is never truly lost. It waits patiently in the soil, in the symbols we cannot yet read, and in the myths that have carried its memory across 3,000 years, inviting us to keep listening for its whisper.